The smoke was black and hungry, devouring Halima Okafor whole as her scream dissolved into ash. Her white server's uniform clung to her skin like a shroud, the fabric already singed at the edges as flames licked closer. She'd never learned to navigate fire escapes in the cramped underground lounges of Seoul, where safety was a luxury reserved for the patrons, not the staff. Her lungs clawed for oxygen that the Inferno had already consumed. This was it. After escaping a suffocating past, building a quiet life in a city that barely saw her, she would die at a rich people's party where nobody even knew her name. But somebody did know her name. Julius Tondreau stood near the VIP exit, his sharp jaw set beneath the orange glow, tailored Tom Ford jacket already gathering soot. He saw her silhouette crumple behind the bar, heard the crash of glassware that the roaring flames nearly swallowed. Every instinct screamed at him to protect his cover, to let his men handle it. But when he heard himself whisper Halima into the chaos, Julius Tondreau, the Ice King himself, walked straight into the fire. Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm responding to everyone. Click subscribe, like this video. Your support helps us bring more thrilling stories, and trust me, you won't want me to miss them. Let's begin. Halima remembered the first time Julius Tondreau looked at her like she was more than furniture. It was 3 months before the fire, on a Tuesday night when the lounge was half empty and the city felt like it was holding its breath. She'd been wiping down the bar, her movements mechanical after an 8-hour shift, when he'd walked in without his usual entourage. No bodyguards flanking him like attack dogs. No assistants whispering into Bluetooth earpieces. Just him, in a black cashmere coat that probably cost more than her yearly rent, looking almost human. "You're here late," she'd said, not looking up. In her experience, eye contact with men like him was an invitation to something she couldn't afford. "So are you." His voice had surprised her. Smooth, but tired. Like expensive whiskey poured over exhaustion. She'd glanced up then, finding him seated at the far end of the bar where the light didn't quite reach. His face was all sharp angles and carefully controlled power, but his eyes held something she recognized, the bone-deep weariness of someone who couldn't stop moving or they'd fall apart. "Soju," she'd offered. "Coffee. Black. Strong enough to forget things." She'd made it the way her mother used to, with a pinch of salt to cut the bitterness. When she'd set it down, their fingers had brushed. Neither of them had pulled away. That should have been nothing. A moment. Forgettable. But Julius had come back the next Tuesday. And the Tuesday after that. They never spoke about what he did or who he was. In those stolen hours between midnight and dawn, he was just a man who couldn't sleep, and she was just a woman who understood the weight of carrying secrets. He'd ask about the book she kept under the register, a worn copy of Homegoing with pages folded at the corners. She'd ask about the scar above his left eyebrow that he touched when he thought no one was watching. "My brother," he'd said once, his voice hollow. Before I became what I am, she hadn't pressed. She'd simply refilled his cup and existed beside him in the comfortable silence of two people who'd both learned that words could be weapons. The affair, if you could even call it that, had started without fanfare. No dramatic confession, no calculated seduction. Just Julius staying past closing one night, helping her stack chairs, because his hands needed something to do besides make life or death decisions. Just Halima laughing at something he'd said about Korean business culture, and him staring at her like he'd forgotten laughter was a real thing people did. "You shouldn't be here," she'd whispered when he'd kissed her for the first time, pressed against the stockroom door with the smell of imported gin and desperation in the air. "I know," he'd breathed against her mouth. "But I'm so tired of being where I should be." Their relationship became a series of hidden moments. Julius arriving at her tiny apartment in Itaewon at 3 in the morning, still wearing blood on his cufflinks that he'd wash off in her sink without explanation. Halima meeting him in empty parking garages where he'd sit in the back seat of armored cars and just hold her, his face buried in her neck like she was oxygen. "They'll kill you if they find out about me," she'd said once, tracing the tattoo of a dragon that curved around his ribs. "They'll kill you," he'd corrected, his jaw tightening. "That's why they can never know." But secrets in Julius's world had a half-life. She'd started noticing the extra security cameras pointed at the lounge, the way certain regulars watched her a little too carefully, the black SUV that idled outside her building on nights when Julius couldn't come. "We should stop," she'd told him 2 weeks before the fire, her voice breaking. "This is going to get us both killed." Julius had cupped her face with hands that had built empires and buried enemies. "Then let me die knowing I was alive for once." She'd believed him. Believed that love could somehow exist in the margins of a life built on violence. Believed that they could keep pretending Tuesday nights were a country with no borders or bloodshed. She'd been wrong. The fire had proven that. Because when Julius had carried her out of those flames, he hadn't just saved her life. He'd detonated the only protection they'd ever had, their invisibility. And now the entire city knew that the Ice King had a weakness. Now the entire city knew her name. Halima woke to the kind of silence that only existed in buildings designed to keep the world out. Her lungs burned with each breath, the phantom taste of smoke still coating her tongue despite the oxygen mask someone had removed while she slept. She blinked against the late morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, her vision slowly adjusting to reveal a space that looked more like a museum than a home. Everything was white marble and black leather, sharp lines and expensive emptiness. The bed beneath her felt like sleeping on a cloud made of money. This wasn't a hospital. This was a fortress. "You're awake," Julius's voice came from somewhere to her left. She turned her head, too quickly, the movement sending a spike of pain through her temples, to find him seated in a chair by the window, still wearing last night's soot-stained shirt. He looked like he hadn't slept, like he'd been keeping watch. "Where am I?" Her voice came out raw, shredded. "My home. The penthouse. Top floor of the Tondreau building in Gangnam." He stood, moving toward her with the careful precision of a man who'd learned to make every gesture count. "The paramedics cleared you. Minor smoke inhalation. Some first-degree burns on your arms. You'll heal." She looked down at her bandaged forearms, the white gauze stark against her brown skin. She was wearing someone else's clothes, an oversized silk shirt that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. Everything about this felt wrong. Borrowed. Temporary. "I need to go home," she said, pushing herself up against the headboard. "My apartment. My things." "Your apartment is being watched by the Choi family." Julius cut her off, his tone matter-of-fact. "Your building superintendent has already received 3 separate bribes to provide information about your schedule. There are 2 journalists camped outside your door, and a private investigator going through your trash." The words hit her like physical blows. "What?" "You went viral, Halima." He pulled out his phone, tapping the screen before holding it out to her. 30 million views in 8 hours. The video was crystal clear despite the chaos. Julius emerging from the burning building with her cradled against his chest, his face twisted in something that looked dangerously close to anguish. The way his hand cupped the back of her head. The way he'd said her name, Halima, so clearly that even the shaky phone camera had caught it. The comments were worse than the footage. Thousands of them, in Korean and English and languages she didn't recognize, all dissecting who she was and what she meant to him. Hidden girlfriend. Secret mistress. Gold digger. Prostitute. Some were defending her. Most weren't. "Turn it off." She shoved the phone away, nausea rising in her throat. Julius pocketed it, his expression unreadable. "You can't go back to your old life. Not anymore. The moment I carried you out of that building, I painted a target on your back the size of Seoul. Then unpaint it." Her voice cracked. "Tell them it was nothing. That you'd save anyone. That I'm no one. You think I haven't tried?" For the first time, she heard something crack in his controlled facade. "I've already had 4 separate family heads contact me this morning. 3 offering to handle you as a favor. 1 offering to buy you as a negotiation tool." He moved closer, crouching beside the bed so they were eye level. "You stopped being no one the second the world saw me look at you like you matter. Because I don't matter. Not in your world." She wanted to sound angry, but it came out desperate. "I'm a waitress, Julius. I serve drinks to people who don't see me. That was the whole point. The point was keeping you alive." His jaw tightened, "Which is exactly what I'm still trying to do." She looked around the sterile luxury of the penthouse, understanding finally settling over her like a second skin. This wasn't a rescue. This was a cage. Beautiful, expensive, and absolutely inescapable. "How long?" she asked quietly. "How long what? How long do I have to stay here? A week? A month? Until people forget?" Julius stood, turning toward the window where Seoul stretched out beneath them like a kingdom he owned. "People like us don't forget, Halima. We collect information and wait for the perfect moment to use it." He paused, his reflection in the glass looking more like a ghost than a man. "You're here until I can guarantee your safety. Which means you're here until I've eliminated every threat. And how do you plan to do that?" He turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd woken, she saw the full weight of what he'd done. What they'd both become the moment those cameras started flashing. "By making sure the whole world knows you're not my weakness," he said, his voice dropping to something cold and certain. "You're my queen, and anyone who touches you dies screaming." The worst part was how much the promise felt like a love confession. Halima had been in the penthouse for 3 days when the ghost walked through the door. She'd been standing in the kitchen, if you could call the steel and marble showroom a kitchen, trying to figure out the espresso machine that probably required an engineering degree to operate. Julius was in his study, on his 5th conference call of the morning, his voice a low rumble of Korean and English threats filtering through the walls. She'd almost gotten used to the rhythm of his world, the constant surveillance. The armed guards who nodded politely but never quite looked at her. The suffocating luxury that felt more like house arrest with better linens. Then the elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse, and a woman stepped out like she owned the place. She was beautiful in the way that money made people beautiful, professionally maintained, strategically enhanced, wrapped in a cream Chanel suit that probably cost more than Halima's student loans. Her hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, her skin glowing with whatever treatments wealthy women got to stop time. But it was her hand that drew Halima's attention, the way it rested on the swell of her belly, protective and performative all at once. "You must be the waitress." Her English was flawless, American accented. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Halima set down the espresso cup carefully, her instincts screaming danger. "And you are?" "Myra Brooks." She said it like the name should mean something, like it should make Halima disappear on command. "Julius's fiancée." "Well," she laughed, the sound sharp as broken glass. "Ex-fiancée, technically. Those circumstances have changed." The study door opened. Julius appeared in the doorway, and Halima watched his face do something she'd never seen before. It went completely blank. Not angry, not surprised, just empty, like someone had reached inside and scooped out everything human. "How did you get past security?" His voice could have frozen fire. "Your father gave me the access codes." Mayra moved further into the space, her heels clicking against marble. "Imagine my surprise when I returned from New York to find my fiancé had become a viral sensation, saving some girl from a fire. Very heroic, Julius. Very unlike you." "We're not engaged, Myra. We haven't been for 2 years. 18 months, she corrected, still smiling that terrible smile. "Since you left me at the Plaza Hotel in front of 300 guests and both our families. Since you humiliated me so thoroughly, I had to leave the country to escape the scandal." Her hand moved over her belly again, deliberate. "But I'm willing to forgive that now, for the sake of our child." The silence that followed felt like the moment before an execution. Halima's brain was trying to process the words, to make them make sense in any configuration that didn't feel like the floor dropping out beneath her. She looked at Julius, searching his face for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make this not real. He was staring at Myra like she'd just declared war. "You're not pregnant with my child," he said quietly. Too quietly. 12 weeks. Myra pulled out her phone, swiping through photos before holding it up. Ultrasound images, medical documents, a whole fabricated history in digital form. "Conceived in January, right before you decided to throw everything away for," she glanced at Halima with thinly veiled disgust, "your charity project." "Julius," an older man's voice boomed from the elevator. Halima turned to see 3 men in expensive suits stepping into the penthouse like an invading army. The oldest had Julius's eyes, and twice his coldness. "We need to talk, now." "Father." "The council has convened." The man, Julius's father, cut him off with the authority of someone used to absolute obedience. "The Brooks family is willing to overlook your indiscretion. Mayra's child legitimizes the alliance we've been building for a decade. This is not a request." Julius's hands curled into fists at his sides. "The child isn't mine. Prove it." Mayra's voice turned to steel. "Take a paternity test, in front of the entire syndicate. Admit publicly that you can't keep track of who you're sleeping with. Watch your empire crumble when they realize the great Julius Tondreau is just another man who can't control himself." She took a step closer. "Or marry me like you should have done 2 years ago, claim this child and salvage what's left of your reputation." "There's no decision to make," Julius's father said. "The wedding will be planned for next month, quietly, privately. And that," he pointed at Halima like she was a piece of furniture, "goes back to wherever she came from." Halima felt something inside her go very still. This was it, the moment she'd known was coming since she'd woken up in this gilded cage. She was expendable, replaceable, a footnote in a story that was never really hers. But when she looked at Julius, she saw something she didn't expect. Not resignation, not apology, pure controlled rage. "Everyone out." His voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of an empire. "Now, Julius," his father started. "I said out." He turned that terrible gaze on his father, on the council members, on Myra, with her performative pregnancy and manufactured crisis. "You have 30 seconds before I demonstrate exactly why people call me the Ice King." Starting with the security footage from the Brooks Medical Clinic in Manhattan that shows Myra hasn't been pregnant once in the last year. Mayra's perfect smile finally cracked. The diamond necklace arrived on a velvet tray at breakfast. Halima stared at it like it might bite her, probably because in Julius's world, beautiful things often did. The stones caught the morning light streaming through the penthouse windows, refracting tiny rainbows across the white tablecloth. Each diamond was the size of a tear, appropriate, considering how much she wanted to cry. "It's from Cartier," Julius said from across the table, not looking up from his tablet. He'd been deflecting calls from his father all morning, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. The same collection Princess Diana wore. You thought you could buy me. Halima pushed the tray away, the screech of metal against marble satisfying in its violence. That got his attention. He set down the tablet, his dark eyes finally meeting hers. I thought I could protect you. With jewelry? With a statement. He gestured at the necklace, like it was evidence in a court case. The Tondreau family has owned 3 pieces from this collection. 1 for my grandmother, 1 for my mother. This would be the 3rd. Do you understand what that means? That you have too much money. That you're not temporary. His voice dropped, taking on that edge she'd learned meant he was barely holding himself together. Every family in the syndicate knows what these stones represent. Legacy, permanence, power. Halima laughed, the sound bitter even to her own ears. I'm a prisoner in a penthouse wearing borrowed clothes, Julius. I haven't been outside in 4 days. I can't call my friends because you confiscated my phone. There are armed men outside the bedroom door who follow me to the bathroom. She stood, the chair scraping back. You can wrap the cage in diamonds, but it's still a cage. It's safety. It's suffocation. The words exploded out of her, months of swallowed fear and resentment finally finding oxygen. You didn't ask if I wanted this. You just decided. The same way you decided we'd be secret. The same way you decided to carry me out of that fire, instead of letting someone else do it. The same way you're deciding how to handle Myra, without telling me anything. Julius stood too, his control finally cracking. What do you want me to tell you? That she's dangerous? That she's backed by the Lee family who've been trying to undermine my territory for years? That her fake pregnancy is just the opening move in a campaign to either control me or destroy me? He moved around the table, closing the distance between them. That I can't sleep because every time I close my eyes I see a dozen different ways they could get to you? I want the truth. Halima's voice broke. You said you had security footage. That you could prove the pregnancy was fake. So why is she still here? Why is your father still pushing for this wedding? Why am I still locked in this apartment like I'm the problem? Julius's jaw worked, his hands flexing at his sides like he wanted to reach for her but didn't trust himself to stop. Because the footage isn't enough. It shows her entering a medical clinic, yes. But her lawyers will argue it's circumstantial. That she could have been visiting a doctor for any number of reasons. He turned away, running a hand through his hair. I need proof that's irrefutable. Medical records. Witness testimony. Something that will hold up when the council demands answers. So get it. You think I'm not trying? He spun back to face her, and for the first time, she saw the cracks in his armor. The exhaustion. The fear. I have every contact I own, digging into her medical history. But Myra's smart. She's been planning this for months, maybe years. Every record is clean. Every doctor she's seen has signed NDAs, backed by the Lee family's legal team. His voice dropped to something raw. She knew exactly how to trap me. Halima felt her anger deflate slightly, replaced by something more complicated. Then let me help. No. Julius, you think I'm going to let you anywhere near this? His voice turned sharp again, protective and possessive in equal measure. Myra tried to burn you alive, Halima. That fire wasn't an accident. It was a warning. A message that said, stay away from what's mine. He moved closer, close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. If she even suspects you're investigating her, she won't stop at fires next time. So what's the alternative? I just sit here and wait while she walks around with her fake belly and plans our destruction? Halima shook her head. That's not protection, Julius. That's just another kind of death. It's the only way I know to keep you breathing. Maybe I don't want to just breathe. She met his eyes, letting him see the truth she'd been hiding. Maybe I want to fight. Maybe I want to stop being the thing you save and start being the person standing beside you. Julius stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Recognition, maybe, or respect. You have no idea what you're asking for. Then teach me. She took a step closer, closing the final distance between them. You said you were tired of being where you should be. Well, I'm tired of being protected like I'm made of glass. If I'm going to be your weakness, at least let me be a weapon too. His hand finally came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything else about him. You were never my weakness, Halima. You were the first real thing I'd touched in years. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. That's what terrifies me. She turned her face into his palm, breathing in the scent of his cologne and the coffee he'd been drinking since dawn. Then be terrified together with me. Stop trying to fight this war alone. Julius closed his eyes, his forehead dropping to rest against hers. For just a moment, in the morning light of his fortress, he looked less like a mafia boss and more like a man who'd forgotten how to ask for help. She's staying at the Sheila Hotel, he finally whispered. Presidential suite, under her mother's name. It wasn't permission, but it was trust. And in Julius's world, that was worth more than diamonds. The Sheila Hotel smelled like old money and older secrets. Halima walked through the lobby in borrowed Dior, courtesy of Julius's stylist, who'd appeared at the penthouse with racks of clothes and a knowing smile, trying to look like she belonged among marble columns and guests who treated luxury like oxygen. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but she kept her face neutral. Invisible. The trick she'd learned working tables in Seoul. Blend into the background until you need to be seen. Myra had sent the invitation herself. A cream cardstock note delivered by private courier, the handwriting elegant and threatening in equal measure. Let's talk, woman to woman, without the men making this uglier than it needs to be. A room number, a time. No pleasantries. The presidential suite occupied the entire top floor. Halima knocked once, her knuckles barely making a sound against the heavy door. It opened immediately. Myra stood framed in the doorway, still playing the role of expectant mother in a flowing ivory dress that probably came from some maternity collection that cost more than a car. Her hand rested on her belly like a shield. You came. Myra's smile was all teeth. I wasn't sure you would. Julius seems like the type who'd want to control every conversation. Julius doesn't control me. Halima stepped inside without waiting for invitation, scanning the suite with the same awareness she'd developed working late shifts in dangerous neighborhoods. 2 exits, floor-to-ceiling windows. A handbag on the console table positioned too deliberately, probably contained mace or worse. No? Mayra closed the door, moving past her toward the sitting area. Then why does he keep you locked in his penthouse like Rapunzel? I've had private investigators watching the building. You haven't left once since the fire. She settled onto a white sofa, arranging herself like she was posing for a portrait. That doesn't sound like freedom to me. You tried to kill me. Halima didn't sit. Didn't want to give up the advantage of height. The fire wasn't an accident. Prove it. Myra's expression didn't change. Grease fires happen all the time in restaurant kitchens. Poor safety standards. Overworked staff. Tragic, really. She paused, letting the words settle. But I didn't invite you here to discuss ancient history. I invited you here to offer you a gift. She reached for a manila envelope on the coffee table, sliding it across the glass surface. Halima didn't move to take it. $10 million, Mayra said, her voice taking on the tone of someone negotiating a business deal. Wired to any account you choose, in any country you prefer. First-class tickets back to wherever you came from. A clean break. You disappear, and Julius gets to keep his empire intact. You think I'm here for money? Everyone's here for something. Mayra's smile sharpened. You're a waitress from, where was it? Some village no one's heard of. You stumbled into Julius's bed and got lucky. Now you're in over your head, playing games with people who will bury you without a second thought. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping to something almost kind. I'm offering you an exit. Take the money, go home. Live whatever small, safe life you were meant to live. Halima felt something cold and certain settle in her chest. This was the moment. The test. She could take the envelope, walk away, let Julius fight his battles alone. Return to invisibility. To safety. She'd spent her whole life choosing safety. No. The word came out quiet, but absolute. Mayra blinked. Excuse me? I said no. Halima moved closer, finally taking a seat across from her, meeting her eyes with the same directness she'd learned from watching Julius negotiate. You can keep your money. I'm not leaving. Don't be stupid. I'm not the one who's stupid. Halima let the words breathe. You're the one pretending to be pregnant to trap a man who doesn't want you. You're the one who started a fire that killed 2 people just to send a message. You're the one so desperate to reclaim something you never really had, that you're willing to burn down an entire city. Mayra's face went very still. The performance dropped, revealing something colder underneath. Careful. Why? You already tried to kill me once. Halima leaned back, forcing herself to look relaxed even though every nerve was screaming. At least now we both know where we stand. You have no idea where you stand. Mayra's voice turned to ice. You're a phase. A distraction. Julius has been with dozens of women like you. Pretty, temporary, ultimately forgettable. I'm the one his family chose. I'm the one who understands his world. I'm the one who's supposed to give him heirs and legitimacy and everything else that actually matters. Her hand pressed harder against her belly. This child, real or not, represents a future. You represent Tuesday nights and slumming. The words were designed to cut, to make Halima feel small and temporary and out of place. A year ago they might have worked, but a year ago, she hadn't watched Julius walk through fire. You're right, Halima said slowly. I don't understand your world. I don't know how to smile while plotting someone's death, or how to weaponize pregnancies, or how to set fires and sleep soundly after. She stood, looking down at Mayra with something like pity. But I understand Julius. I understand the parts of him he doesn't show anyone else. The parts that are tired and human and desperately trying to be something other than the Ice King. She moved toward the door, then paused, turning back. You can keep threatening me. You can keep playing your games with fake ultrasounds and family councils. But here's what you don't understand, Myra. I already survived my life trying to kill me. Your version of danger is just Tuesday for me. If you walk out that door, you're declaring war. Myra stood too, her composure cracking at the edges. I have resources you can't imagine, connections that span continents. The Lee family behind me, and half the syndicate in my pocket. What do you have? Halima opened the door, soul spreading out behind her through the hallway windows. I have the one thing you're never going to get. Which is, him choosing me. She walked out before Myra could respond, her hands shaking only once she reached the elevator. The doors closed on Myra's face, fury and calculation in equal measure, and Halima allowed herself one moment of pure terror at what she'd just done. Then she pulled out her phone, the new one Julius had given her with more security than a government installation, and typed a single message. She's not backing down. Neither am I. His response came before the elevator reached the ground floor. Good. I'll teach you how to fight. The training started at dawn, before the city woke up, and before Julius's phone began its relentless assault of calls and crises. Halima found him in a room she hadn't known existed, accessed through a hidden door in his study that opened to reveal what could only be described as a war room. Screens covered one wall, cycling through security feeds from properties she didn't recognize. The opposite wall held a massive digital map of Seoul, color-coded territories marked like a military campaign. In the center sat a conference table made of black glass, currently covered in files, photographs, and what looked like psychological profiles. This is how I see the world, Julius said without preamble, gesturing at the chaos. Every family, every alliance, every pressure point and potential betrayal. He pulled out a chair for her. If you're going to survive them, you need to see it too. For the next 3 hours, he walked her through the ecosystem of power that ruled Seoul's underworld. The Kim family controlled shipping and imports. The Park family owned half the politicians and all the judges that mattered. The Lee family, Myra's backers, specialized in information and blackmail. Their empire built on secrets that could end careers or lives with equal efficiency. They're waiting for me to make a mistake, Julius said, pointing to a cluster of red markers on the map. The moment I show weakness, they'll move. The pregnancy claim was just the opening. They're testing whether I'll choose love over power. And what happens when they realize you already have? Halima asked quietly. He looked at her then, something shifting in his expression. Vulnerability, maybe, or recognition. Then they'll try to take you away from me, permanently. The next lesson was harder. Julius brought in Min Jun, his head of security, a man built like a wall with eyes that missed nothing. They spent hours teaching Halima how to read a room for exits, how to identify security personnel versus hired threats, how to move through crowds without being followed. She learned which questions to ask at parties to extract information without seeming interested, which drinks to avoid, and which conversations to end before they became dangerous. You're not trying to become one of them, Julius explained during a break, watching her practice reading micro-expressions in surveillance footage. You're trying to become something they can't categorize. Too smart to dismiss. Too valuable to eliminate. Dangerous enough to respect. So basically you, she said, half joking. No, his voice went serious. Better than me, because you still have something I lost years ago. What's that? The ability to see people as people instead of chess pieces. The training evolved over days. Julius taught her about money, how it moved through shell corporations and offshore accounts, how fortunes could be hidden in art collections or cryptocurrency wallets. He showed her contracts written in language designed to trap the unwary, prenuptial agreements that read like death sentences. He explained how the syndicate maintained its power through a combination of legitimate business and strategic violence, each family contributing different resources to the collective whole. But it was the night lessons that changed something between them. They'd sit in his study after the formal training ended, drinking whiskey that cost more than her former monthly rent, and he'd tell her stories about his brother who died in a territory dispute when Julius was 19, forcing him to inherit an empire he'd never wanted. About his mother who'd OD'd on pills when the pressure of being a mafia wife became unbearable. About the first time he'd had to order someone killed and how he'd vomited in his car afterward, then walked into a board meeting like nothing had happened. I thought I'd feel powerful, he admitted one night, his voice raw with exhaustion and whiskey. But I just felt empty, like I'd traded everything human about myself for a crown made of blood. Halima reached across the desk, taking his hand. His fingers were cold. You're not empty, Julius. You're just tired. I'm a monster who happens to be good at accounting. You're a man who walked through fire to save a waitress he was supposed to keep secret. She squeezed his hand. Monsters don't do that. He looked at their joined hands like he was seeing them for the first time. Myra used to say I was broken, that the only thing I was good at was destroying things. Maybe you were just destroying yourself, trying to be what everyone else needed. Halima stood, moving around the desk until she was close enough to see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw. What do you need, Julius? The question seemed to break something in him. He pulled her down into his lap, burying his face against her neck, his breath coming in shaky gasps that might have been sobs if he'd allowed himself that weakness. I need you safe, he whispered against her skin. I need you alive. I need you to stay even though every logical part of me knows I should let you go. His arms tightened around her. I need to stop being the Ice King for 5 fucking minutes and just be Julius, the man who's terrified he's going to lose the only good thing he's ever touched. Halima ran her fingers through his hair, feeling him shake with the effort of holding himself together. This was the real training, she realized. Not learning how to navigate his world, but learning how to exist together in it without losing themselves completely. Then be Julius, she said softly. I'll handle the Ice King when he's needed. He laughed against her throat, the sound broken and relieved. You're going to be terrifying when I'm done training you. Good. She tilted his face up, meeting his eyes. Because I need you to teach me one more thing. What's that? How to make Myra regret ever coming back. His smile turned sharp, the Ice King bleeding back into his features. But his hand stayed gentle on her waist, and when he kissed her, it tasted like trust and partnership, and the beginning of something that looked dangerously like equality. With pleasure, he murmured. Let's go to war. Halima started noticing the cracks 3 weeks into Myra's performance. It began with small things. The way Myra held a champagne flute at a charity gala Julius had been forced to attend, her lips barely touching the rim before she set it down, but the glass was empty when the servers cleared it. The way her pregnancy glow looked suspiciously like professional makeup that ended at her jawline. The way she touched her belly constantly in public, but never when she thought no one was watching. But it was the shoes that gave it away. Halima had worked enough high-end events to recognize Louboutin Pigalle's 6-inch stilettos. She'd also spent enough time around Julius's security team, 2 of whom had pregnant wives, to know that no woman 12 weeks pregnant would torture herself in heels that could double as weapons. The swelling alone would make it agony. Yet Myra wore them everywhere, never once complained, never once showed signs of the discomfort that should have been constant. She's lying about something, Halima told Julius one night, scrolling through photos on her tablet. Social media was a goldmine if you knew what to look for. Look at this. 2 weeks ago, she posted about prenatal yoga. But the studio she tagged doesn't offer prenatal classes. I checked. Julius leaned over her shoulder, his chin resting against her head. Could be a mistake. Or it could be that she's not actually pregnant and doesn't know what pregnant women actually do. Halima swiped to another photo. And here, she's drinking what she calls a mocktail at the Mondrian. But I worked that bar for 6 months. That's a Negroni, real gin, real Campari. No pregnant woman would risk it. She felt Julius tense behind her. You're playing detective. I'm paying attention. She turned to face him. You said she's been visiting a clinic in Manhattan. Did you ever get the name? Brooks Medical Associates. Private practice in the Upper East Side. His jaw tightened. My people tried to access her records, but they're sealed tighter than military files. Her mother owns the building. The Lee family owns her mother. What about here? In Seoul? Halima's mind was racing now, connecting threads. She's been back for 3 weeks. She'd need prenatal care. Checkups. Ultrasounds at this stage. Julius pulled out his phone, typing rapidly. I'll have Min Jun look into recent appointments. No. Halima stood, pacing. If you send your people, the Lee family will know you're investigating. They'll warn her. Cover tracks. She stopped, turning back to him. But a curious girlfriend asking questions at the right clinic? That's just gossip. Absolutely not. Julius, you want to walk into hostile territory and ask questions about the woman who tried to burn you alive? His voice went cold, protective. No. Find another way. But Halima had already learned enough from his training to know when to push and when to simply act. The next morning, while Julius was in emergency meetings about a shipping container that had mysteriously caught fire in Busan, she put on her most expensive borrowed outfit and walked into the Seoul Women's Medical Center in Gangnam. The receptionist looked up with the practiced smile of someone paid to be pleasant to wealthy clients. Do you have an appointment? I'm inquiring about prenatal care, Halima said, lowering her voice conspiratorially. A friend recommended your facility. Mayra Brooks? She said Dr. Kim was wonderful. The receptionist's smile flickered. Just for a second. Just enough. I'm sorry, but we don't have a patient by that name. Are you sure? She specifically mentioned Dr. Kim. About 12 weeks along. Blonde hair, American. I'm certain. The receptionist's tone turned from pleasant to steel. We take patient privacy very seriously. Now, if you'd like to schedule your own consultation, that won't be necessary. Halima left before security could be called, her heart hammering. Not a patient there. Strike one. She tried 3 more clinics over the next 2 days, using different approaches each time. At the second, she claimed to be Myra's sister visiting from the States. At the third, she said she was coordinating a baby shower and needed to confirm due dates. At the fourth, a luxury facility in Qingdamdong, where a single appointment cost more than most people's monthly salary. She simply asked if they validated parking for prenatal visits. Each time, the answer was the same. No record of Myra Brooks. She's not seeing any obstetrician in Seoul, Halima told Julius that night, spreading out her notes on his desk. I checked every high-end facility in the city. Nothing. Not even under her mother's name, or the Lee family holdings. Julius studied her work with the intensity of a general reviewing battle plans. She could be flying to New York for appointments. 12 weeks pregnant? Flying internationally every week for basic checkups? Halima shook her head. That doesn't make sense. Unless there's nothing to check up on. They looked at each other, the same realization dawning. The Manhattan Clinic, Halima said slowly. Your people said her records were sealed. But what if there are no records to seal? What if Brooks Medical Associates isn't a real clinic at all? Julius was already typing, his fingers flying across his laptop keyboard. Her mother owns the building. She could have created an entire fake medical practice. Letterhead, ultrasound photos, doctor's signatures, all fabricated. But the pregnancy test at the syndicate meeting can be faked. Julius pulled up something on his screen, turning it to show her. You can buy positive pregnancy tests online. Or she could have used someone else's urine. There are entire forums dedicated to beating drug tests and pregnancy screenings. His expression darkened. If the Lee family is backing her, they'd have access to medical professionals willing to falsify documentation. Halima felt cold certainty settle over her. So she's not pregnant at all. Never was. Which means she's been running a con this entire time. Julius stood, pacing like a caged animal. But we still can't prove it. She'll claim doctor-patient confidentiality. The Lee family's lawyers will bury us in injunctions. By the time we get a court order for medical records that don't exist, she'll have pivoted to a different strategy. Then we don't go through lawyers. Halima's voice was steady, even as her hands shook. We make her prove it herself, publicly, in a way she can't refuse. Julius stopped pacing, looking at her with something like pride and terror. You want to challenge her directly. I want to corner her. Halima met his eyes. There's a fundraiser next week. The one your father is hosting for the new children's hospital wing. Myra will be there, playing the devoted almost mother. Half of Seoul's elite will be watching. And pregnant women get asked certain questions at events like that. Due dates, baby names, which hospital they've chosen for delivery. Halima's smile was sharp enough to cut. Let's see how well she's memorized her script. Let's see if she can maintain the lie when everyone is watching and the pressure is on. Julius moved closer, cupping her face in his hands. She'll know what you're doing. It'll make her desperate. Good. Halima leaned into his touch, drawing strength from his presence. Desperate people make mistakes. And I've spent my entire life watching powerful people. I know exactly which questions will make her crack. He kissed her then, hard and possessive, and tinged with fear. You've become dangerous, he murmured against her lips. You taught me well. I did. He pulled back, his eyes dark with promise and warning. But remember, once we do this, there's no going back. We're forcing her hand. And when cornered animals fight back, they go for the throat. Halima thought of the fire, the smoke. The moment she'd accepted, she was going to die in a city that didn't know her name. She'd already survived Myra's worst. Let her try, she said. This time I'll be ready. The Seoul Grand Hyatt ballroom glittered like a dragon's hoard, every surface reflecting the light of chandeliers that cost more than small nations. Halima descended the marble staircase in a gown the color of blood, custom Valentino that Julius had commissioned specifically for tonight. The message was clear. She wasn't hiding anymore. The assembled elite watched her entrance with the predatory interest of sharks scenting blood in the water. Whispers followed her like a wake. The waitress, the secret, the girl from the fire. Julius waited at the bottom of the stairs, devastating in Tom Ford black, his hand extended like a promise. When she took it, cameras flashed. Another headline. Another declaration. You look like war, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Good, she whispered back. Because that's what we're about to start. The ballroom was a carefully choreographed performance of wealth and power. Julius's father held court near the bar, surrounded by family heads who smiled with their mouths but calculated with their eyes. The Park family matriarch evaluated Halima like livestock at auction. The Kim brothers watched Julius with the wariness of men who'd bet on the wrong horse. And there, in the center of it all, stood Myra Brooks. She dressed for the role, flowing champagne silk that artfully suggested rather than clung, her hand resting on the now prominent curve of her belly. A prosthetic, Halima realized with cold certainty. Probably medical grade, designed to fool even close inspection. Myra was holding court with a circle of society wives, her laugh carrying across the room like breaking glass. She's wearing padding, Halima said quietly. High-end. It moves when she breathes. Julius's jaw tightened. Minjun confirmed the Manhattan clinic doesn't exist. The building is listed as private offices. No medical license on file. His voice dropped lower. But someone's been helping her. Someone with access to our security protocols. She knew exactly when and where to start that fire. Before Halima could respond, a hand clapped Julius on the shoulder. Park Jae-sung, Julius's right-hand man for the past 5 years, appeared beside them with champagne flutes and an easy smile. Jae-sung had been the one to pull Julius into the family business after his brother died. The one Julius trusted with territory negotiations and offshore accounts. The golden couple, Jae-sung said, his English accented but smooth. You've made quite the entrance, Miss Okafor. Seoul hasn't been this entertained in years. Something in his tone made Halima's instincts scream. She'd learned to read subtext during her training. The slight emphasis on entertained, the way his smile didn't reach his eyes, the positioning of his body angled toward the exit, not toward them. Jae-sung. Julius accepted the champagne, but didn't drink. Is everything in place? Of course. The medical team is standing by, as requested. Jae-sung's gaze flicked to Myra, then back. Though I have to ask, are you certain this is wise? Publicly challenging her could backfire. The Lee family won't take humiliation lightly. Let me worry about the Lee family, Julius said, his voice cooling several degrees. Jae-sung raised his hands in surrender. Of course. I'm just looking out for you, brother. Like always. He melted back into the crowd, but not before Halima caught the briefest glance he threw toward Myra. Recognition. Coordination. Julius, she said carefully. Did you tell Jae-sung about tonight's plan? I tell Jae-sung everything. He frowned. Why? But Halima was already moving, her training kicking in. Reading the room like Julius had taught her. Following the threads of eye contact and subtle gestures. Myra glancing at her phone. Jae-sung near the service entrance, speaking urgently to someone in a staff uniform. The Lee family's head of security positioning himself near the stage where Julius's father would make the evening's announcements. We have a problem, she said, pulling Julius aside. Jae-sung just signaled Myra. And there's additional security here that isn't yours. Julius went very still, the way apex predators did before they struck. You're sure? I'm sure. Halima's heart was racing, but her voice stayed steady. Whatever you're planning, they know. They're ready. The microphone feedback screeched through the ballroom. Julius's father took the stage, commanding attention with the ease of a man born to power. Thank you all for coming tonight. We gather not just to celebrate the new pediatric wing, but to celebrate family, legacy, the future of what we've built together. He gestured toward Myra, who moved gracefully toward the stage, one hand protective over her belly. The crowd's attention locked on her like a spotlight. Many of you know my son Julius has made unconventional choices lately. Polite laughter rippled through the room. But tonight, I'm pleased to announce that he's come to his senses. Julius and Myra Brooks will be married next month, legitimizing the heir to the Tondreau name. The words hit like a physical blow. Halima felt Julius tense beside her, his hand tightening around hers. I never agreed to that, he said, loud enough to carry. The ballroom went silent. Even the orchestra stopped playing. Julius's father's smile turned glacial. We discussed this, son. The family decided. The family doesn't decide who I marry. Julius moved toward the stage, pulling Halima with him. Every eye in the room tracked their progress. And they certainly don't decide based on a lie. Myra's expression flickered. Julius, please don't do this. Don't do what? Expose the fact that you're not pregnant. His voice cut through the ballroom like a blade. That you've been wearing a prosthetic belly and showing fake ultrasounds? That the Manhattan clinic doesn't exist, and you haven't seen a single obstetrician in Seoul. Gasps erupted. The crowd pressed closer, phones appearing like weapons. This was better than any scandal they'd paid for. That's ridiculous, Myra said, but her voice wavered. I have medical documentation. From a clinic that doesn't have a medical license. Run by your mother. Backed by the Lee family. Julius was on the stage now, facing her down. You want to prove me wrong? Let's call an obstetrician right now. Live ultrasound. Real medical examination. In front of everyone. Mayra's face went pale. I don't have to prove anything to you. Yes, you do. This came from an unexpected source. Julius's father, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. If you're carrying my grandchild, you'll submit to examination. Now, father. Mayra started, but Julius's father cut her off with a gesture. Unless my son is right. Unless this has all been an elaborate performance. The trap was closing. Halima could see Mayra realizing it, her eyes darting toward Jae-sung for help. But Jae-sung was already moving toward the exit, his cover blown, his loyalty revealed. Stop him, Julius said quietly to his security team. But Jae-sung was fast, and he'd planned his escape well. He made it to the service door before Minjun tackled him, both men crashing into a catering table. The fight was brief and brutal. When Minjun hauled Jae-sung to his feet, blood was streaming from his nose. Tell them, Julius said, his voice deadly calm. Tell them how you helped Mayra plan the fire, how you gave her our security schedules, how you've been feeding information to the Lee family for months. Jae-sung spat blood on the marble floor. You were weak, he snarled. Distracted by some waitress, when you should have been focused on the empire. Mayra offered me partnership. Real power, not just being your errand boy. And the Lee family offered what? Territory? Money? Julius moved closer, every step measured. Was it worth betraying 5 years of brotherhood? It was worth not watching you destroy everything your brother died for. Jae-sung's voice broke with genuine emotion. He would have hated what you've become. Soft. Human. Caring more about some girl than the family name. Julius hit him. Once. Hard enough that Jae-sung dropped like a puppet with cut strings. The ballroom erupted in chaos. The Lee family's security moved toward the exits. Society wives clutched their pearls and phones in equal measure. Julius's father stood frozen on stage, the reality of the betrayal settling over him like ash. And Mayra was backing away from the stage, her hand falling from her fake belly, the performance finally over. It's over, Halima said, loud enough for the room to hear. The pregnancy. The engagement. The lie. Mayra looked at her with pure hatred. You've just made an enemy of the most powerful families in Seoul. No, Julius said, taking Halima's hand. We just exposed them. There's a difference. As security escorted Mayra and Jae-sung out, Halima felt Julius lean close, his breath warm against her ear. Still want to be queen, he murmured. She looked at the ballroom full of wolves, at the empire built on secrets and blood, at the man beside her who'd chosen her over everything. Only if you're ready to be a king who tells the truth. His smile was sharp and real. And entirely hers. Then let's burn it all down and build something better. The Seoul skyline looked different at dawn from the top of the Tondro building, like the city was being reborn in shades of gold and steel. Halima stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of what used to be Julius's father's office, watching the streets wake below. 3 months had passed since the gala. 3 months since the exposure that had rewritten the power structure of an entire city. The headlines had been vicious at first. Mafia boss chooses Waitress over dynasty. Tondro empire in crisis. The fall of the Ice King. But empires didn't fall just because people wanted them to. The Lee family had moved first, trying to capitalize on the chaos. They'd attempted a hostile takeover of the Tondro shipping operations, backed by 2 smaller families who'd smelled blood in the water. It had been brutal and swift, the kind of corporate warfare that left bodies in expensive suits and bankruptcies filed at midnight. Julius had been more brutal, more swift. He'd leveraged every piece of evidence they'd gathered on Mayra's fraud. Every connection Jae-sung had exposed in his desperate confession. The Lee family's information empire crumbled when Julius released proof of their blackmail operations to the media. Not the underground whisper network, but actual journalists with actual ethics. Politicians they'd controlled for decades suddenly found their courage. Judges they'd bought remembered their oaths. Within 6 weeks, the Lee patriarch was facing indictment for racketeering. Mayra had fled to Singapore with whatever money she could salvage. Jae-sung was serving 15 years in a prison Julius's family didn't control, which meant he'd actually have to serve them. The remaining families had watched, calculated, and then, one by one, they'd come to negotiate. Not with Julius's father. With Julius. You're up early. Julius's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. She felt his arms wrap around her waist, his chin settling on her shoulder. Can't stop watching your kingdom. Our kingdom, she corrected, leaning back into his warmth. And I was just thinking about how strange it is. 6 months ago, I was invisible. Now I'm essential. He turned her to face him, his eyes serious, despite the soft morning light. The Park family won't negotiate territory disputes without you in the room. The Kim brothers asked specifically for your input on their new import regulations. You've brokered 3 peace agreements in 2 months. Halima smiled, remembering the shock on those men's faces when she'd walked into negotiations. The way they'd underestimated her exactly once, before realizing she'd learned from the best. Julius had taught her to read people, but she taught herself how to make them underestimate her, and then use that assumption as a weapon. "Your father still hates me," she said. "My father hates that he was wrong about you." Julius brushed a strand of hair from her face. He spent 30 years building power on secrets and fear. You walked in and proved that transparency could be just as effective. It hadn't been easy. The transition from shadow to light had cost them. Business partnerships that couldn't survive scrutiny. Alliances built on mutual corruption rather than mutual benefit. Julius had been forced to make choices his father never would have. Legitimizing operations, cutting ties with the worst offenders, actually paying taxes on some holdings. The empire was smaller now, cleaner, stronger. "The women's shelter opens next week," Halima said, thinking about the project that had consumed her last month. Using Tondro resources to create safe houses for women escaping dangerous situations, domestic violence, human trafficking, situations that looked disturbingly like her own past. The Kim family contributed. So did the Parks. Even some of the smaller families pitched in. "Because you asked them to." Julius's voice carried pride. "Because you made them see that investing in the community makes their own operations more stable. That's not something I could have done. You could have." "No," he cut her off gently. "I was too busy being the Ice King, too committed to the performance. You showed me there was another way." He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. "You showed all of us." Movement in the doorway made them both turn. Min Jun stood there, tablet in hand, looking less like security, and more like the chief of operations he'd become after Jae Sung's betrayal. "Morning briefing," he asked in English, his accent still heavy but improving. He'd made it a point to learn, to bridge the gap between Halima's world and theirs. "Give us 5 minutes, Julius said. Min Jun nodded and disappeared. But his presence was a reminder. The work never stopped. There were still territories to manage, disputes to mediate, threats to neutralize. The empire demanded constant attention. But it was different now. They were different now. Julius pulled a small box from his pocket, the velvet worn like he'd been carrying it for days. "I was going to wait, plan some elaborate proposal, maybe hire an orchestra, or rent out a restaurant." He opened it, revealing a ring that caught the morning light. Simple platinum band, single diamond, elegant without being ostentatious. "But I realized we're past performances." Halima's breath caught. "Julius, I'm not asking you to be my wife for the empire's sake, or for legitimacy, or because it makes political sense." His voice was steady, certain. "I'm asking because I want to wake up every morning for the rest of my life and see you watching our kingdom. Because you make me want to be better than the Ice King. Because you're the only person who's ever made me feel like Julius Tondro was enough." She looked at the ring, then at him. This man who'd walked through fire, who'd chosen her over dynasty, who'd let her transform his empire into something neither of them had imagined possible. "Yes," she said simply. "But on one condition." His eyebrow raised. "You're negotiating your own proposal." "You taught me to negotiate everything." She smiled. "The waitress uniform I was wearing the night of the fire. The one the museum wants for their Soul Stories exhibit. What about it? I want it displayed with a plaque that tells the real story. Not the fairy tale, not the romantic rescue." Her voice strengthened. "I want it to say that a woman refused to stay invisible. That she survived fire and betrayal and empire politics. That she didn't just get saved, she saved herself, and then she helped save a city." Julius slid the ring onto her finger, his smile sharp and proud, and entirely hers. "Deal. Though I'm adding a footnote that she also saved a Mafia boss from himself. That's fair." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, the city waking around them like applause. When they finally pulled apart, Seoul stretched beneath them in the golden morning light. Messy, complicated, theirs. "Ready for the briefing?" he asked. Halima looked at the ring on her finger, at the man beside her, at the empire they'd rebuilt from ash and truth. "Ready," she said. "Let's go rule our kingdom." They walked toward the conference room hand in hand, no longer hiding, no longer secret. The waitress and the Mafia boss, rewriting the rules of power one honest decision at a time. Behind them the sun rose over Seoul, and the city that had once tried to burn her alive now bore her name on buildings and shelters and stories that would be told for generations. She'd survived the fire, and from the ashes, she'd built an empire of her own. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe.